All right. Welcome to another AGI Policy Seminar. I said webinar the other time, it's seminar, because we have been doing quite a lot of in-person events. And today, I'm very glad to have my co-author, good friend, Bernard Yeung from the NUS, National University of Singapore, to come to Hong Kong. Born and raised in Hong Kong, always welcome you back to your hometown. A short introduction, he needs no introduction, but I still have to do the formal thing. He's currently the Stephen Rady Distinguished Professor in Finance and Strategic Management at the National University of Singapore. He's the founding president of the Asian Bureau of Finance and Economic Research, also in Singapore. He was the dean of 2019. Before professor in global business, economics, and management at New York University Stern School of Business. And before that, he taught at U of Michigan as well as U of Alberta. So as we all know, inequality is a very severe social economic problem for almost every country in the world. And there have been some demand from the public that perhaps any government can do a little bit to reduce inequality through perhaps more upward mobility, or something very sensitive, and that is how we can possibly redistribute by taxation, obviously on the rich, and help through higher tax revenue we can distribute some of the income, or at least create some programs to help the poor. So he's very glad that Professor Yeung can talk about his research based on household level data from Singapore, and obviously how the Singaporean government have done a little bit of that and what are the consequences of those policies. Thank you, Professor Yeung, please.
You can hear me all right, right? Yeah. Well, thank you for the invitation. As someone born and raised in Hong Kong, it's always very emotional and touching that I'm able to come back to Hong Kong to present my work. So thank you. Thank you to AGI, and thank you for you all for supporting this. The topic I'm talking about, Hiwei already introduced it, so maybe I'll just cut right into it. That is not cutting right into it. Okay, all right. Maybe I'll just raise the level of generality a little bit. In today's world, I think we all know that income inequality is rising everywhere, across country, within country. Second, we all know that the government debt level, well, wait until June 1st, you'll see what happened in the US. The government debt level and the government deficit are very high. And also, just a few weeks ago, or actually 2 days ago, the First Republic went down. And it was because the government had to hold up the interest rate to try its best to contain the stubbornly still non-trivial inflation expectations. All this translates to government policy tools are very, very limited. No borrowing and spend. Monetary policy, no, you trigger inflation again. So we look into our toolkits and think about what we can do. And by the way, it's more than just income disparity and so on. There's one thing that everyone has to pay attention to. Over lunch, we were just talking about, you have to find some way to introduce, to re-educate your population so that they raise their capability and productivity. So the government has so many spendings that he had to cater to. It's not trivial, but the policy room is very limited. So what do? So it happened that when I was in Singapore, I'm still in Singapore. I was a bit involved with some of the policy makers' discussions, including the economic strategy policies in Singapore and so on. One of the things that Mr. Tarman, and I respect him a lot, in 2015 was this. He said that we need to raise the tax the rich and redistribute. I'm going to skip this. He said that we need to raise the government spending. I'm looking for a position that I can see the screen myself. So if I stand here, is it okay? So then I won't have to twist my neck. No chiropractor here for me, right? So he say, look, in his speech, wonderful speech. I urge all the up and coming scholars to take a look at it. He say, raise government spending on the workforce, spend money on preschool childcare credits, distributed senior, because many of the older people they are having longer than expected life expectancy. So how can we help them? They may not have enough savings to handle all this. They say, so we raise the tax. Raising the tax only to those that make more than 160,000 Singapore dollar per year. That's roughly about a mil Hong Kong dollar. Okay, and I'm going to test this. Junhong, you were in Singapore in those days. Do you remember that they raised the tax? Yeah. Did you curtail your consumption?
I'm not affected.
She shake her head. You heard that? Not affected. All right. So there's something we observe on the ground. That talking to our colleagues and say, oh, raise the tax. Okay. Then it creates an opportunity for us to really look into details of this fiscal program. Tax the rich, redistribute the poor, and spend some of the money to the senior. And this is consistent with some of the things that people like, the top scholars and many of the scholars like Chen Lin work with, and here where you work with many of your students, that there are many very interesting policy questions in Asia. You can find the opportunity, and you can use the micro-level data to come up with answers to those questions, and you help more than just the local, but globally. So what we have is that limited policy tool. There is an experiment in Singapore, and we do have micro-level data, which is DBS, the Development Bank of Singapore, and another credit card company. We can do a detailed household finance study and see what is the impact of all this. And maybe our answer can be useful for policymakers, not just in Singapore, but for other places too, because we all need this. So let me just go into it right now. What do we do? The tax increase will apply to 2016 income. It was announced in February, applied to 2016, and then all the Singapore residents and so on will have to start to pay tax 2016. So we take this we take this opportunity to address three questions. What's the impact of tax increase on the rich? Economists is averse to raising tax, thinking that it may affect aggregate demand. The answer is no, it doesn't. Second, is redistribution wasteful? There are all kinds of horror stories by the mass media, popular stories about welfare queens and so on. So we ask this question. Is redistribution wasteful? The third question is that everyone will be concerned. Economists will talk about general equilibrium effect, and you worry about the long-term backfiring, providing this incentive for people to save, for people to invest. So we ask these three questions. What's the impact on the consumption of the rich? Is the redistribution wasteful? And does it provide disincentive to those that will receive the benefit? So here we go. We use what we, yes.
I'm not sure whether it can be applied to others and tax. Because in Singapore, the very top rate, the income tax is, I think the base rate is pretty low. It's around 10% on average.
Go on.
So that's the question. So many people do not try to avoid the tax. They do not find any loopholes to avoid tax payment. Because the base rate is very low. That's the first. And the second one, I think even by 1% increase, that's the margin. It's only at the high.
But isn't that first about whether people do tax avoidance, tax evasion? That's another story.
Yeah.
But isn't that if it's marginal, you are getting into the game, playing, arbitraging against the marginal propensity to consume? That's essentially the idea. It is marginal propensity to consume. You're rich, I take $1 from you, it doesn't affect you too much, but that dollar transferred to people with very low income is great. So this is some of the underlying economic concept. No, they hand out. I talk about redistribution. Tax the rich and pass on to the poor. That's exactly the program, right? So, so we're asking these 3 questions, and we draw from myself and Sumit Agarwal, Chen Wen-nan, and Wan Chiang, and also Tian Yu. So a whole bunch of us are working on a series of papers about this. So we use 2 micro-level data, meaning this micro-level meaning I know which individual, even though the identity is not revealed, spend what. I know the education, the age, where they live, and so on and so forth. And I know how much they spend based on the data. This kind of thing was not available in the past, but now with digitization, it's amply available. So for all the people who want to do research, there's a great gold mine in front of you. Or if you don't know, just ask some of your teachers. They have a lot, and they have more than they can handle. So the next thing is that what we do is that we use, statistically speaking, difference in difference. Essentially, to make it simple, I have a control group, those that are not texted. And then I have those that are texted. I compare those not texted against those that are texted and look at the change in their consumption or other things over time, controlling for the individual fixed effect and the time fixed effect. Simply put, control, treatment, what's the difference between them over time? That's all there is to it. It's a very simple concept. Let's forget about cluster by this and that and so on. Let's just move on to see what it is. Here, there is a credit card company and there's a DBS company. We can talk about how representative they are. I can say that actually they're good enough. Okay. And then what we have is that for the credit card company, we can compare before the announcement and after the announcement. And for the DBS, with all this wonderful personal data, we can compare before the treatment and the tax collection. So we piled 2 different data sets with enough observations that allow us to do the thing. So empirical finding. Let me first say that there are 3 questions. What's the impact of the tax on consumption among those that are taxed? What happened to the redistribution? And third, I'll talk about whether those that receive money are using the money cleverly and whether they game against the system. The third question I'll postpone a little bit. Let me handle the first and the second. What's the impact of the tax on the higher income people's consumption? And what is the impact of the redistribution? What's the overall impact? Okay, so let me go with the first one. Instead of going through the statistics and so on, let me just show you. This is panel A is a credit card company. Panel B is the DBS, Development Bank of Singapore. I tracked down people, we, the co-authors, tracked down all the people in our observation. The red line is the control group. Who are they? Their income is in between 100,000 to 150. So not low. Close enough to those that are being taxed, but they are not taxed. The blue line are those that are taxed. So I tracked down their consumption before and after the announcement. I tracked down their consumption before and after the tax collection, the implementation. And we find out that they parallel. They are there's no visible differentiation. So this should give you the impression that Junhong is right. She said, yeah, but she sees the text, but she doesn't change her consumption. And the other thing that you can do is to look at how much is being taxed. Because of the richness of the data, I could tell which individual was taxed by how much on the addition after the tax increase. So I know exactly how much more they pay. I can connect how much more they pay to the change in consumption. Each extra dollar they pay in the future, 6 weeks ahead, and then 6 weeks after, I track down the change, the percent change in the consumption. The answer is no change. So this should establish the impression that somehow taxing the rich does not affect their consumption. The control group and the treatment group, those that are taxed, whereas those that are in the neighborhood but not taxed, they are the same. And for those who are statistically sophisticated, you can ask me about whether they're comparable or not. I say we can use statistical technique the propensity score to identify the similar people. It's sort of like I can do statistical train brothers and sisters and find out that after controlling for that, things are okay. So the first story is that I am not going to spend time on this. I just want to post that, oh, I have actually done this well, and that's all. Okay? So don't worry about it. I'm not going to put everyone asleep and discussing the regression. So then after we have established that no change, then the thing in our mind is, wait a minute. Maybe we are just mixing apples and oranges together. There are some people who are more likely to really curtail the consumption, but they are not popular, they do not occupy the sample large enough. We don't see the result. Why don't we focus on those that will really have a good reason to curtail the consumption? Who are they? What if I have a lot of debt? I have a lot of credit card debt. Okay, that's one example. And so I just look at people that are, I just focus on this, forget the rest. Just look at those people that have a lot of debt. Okay, now you have a lot of debt, the government raised your taxes. You expect that these people will have to curtail the consumption. But even they don't. It's really interesting. Then there's one group that will curtail the consumption. And this part I want to talk about because it really is serious economics. The group in Singapore, there are 3 types of people that pay taxes. I mean, illegal, forget them. I can't catch them. Citizens, they pay. Permanent residents, they pay. The third is employment pass. What's employment pass? Employment pass are those people that they are allowed to go in and out of Singapore. They hold a decent job in Singapore. And they pay taxes. Before I became a PR, I was an employment pass person. There's a difference between employment pass and those that are permanent residents or citizens. You think about it. For everybody, the government budget, at the end of the day, have to balance. You cannot pull a rabbit out of a hat. The government total revenue over time and the government spending over time have to match. There's no magic. This is just the budget constraint. So today's tax is equal to tomorrow's tax. If the government so decide that I'm going to raise the tax today, finance the consumption, that means that in the future they don't raise your tax. Or if the government say I'm going to borrow from you, so they don't tax you now, but in the future they tax you. So here the trick is that if the government take the money and spend it intelligently, it may actually have a positive macroeconomic effect. It raised something. And if you do not live there long enough, you don't get the future benefit. You only get the current tax. Let me repeat. Economic logic says that the government's overall spending over time and the government's revenue over time have to match to equal to 0. So current tax and future tax are the same. Current borrowing and future tax will be the same. However, government raised the expenditure and has to find some additional revenues and so on. But if the government take the expenditure cleverly, invest in the right thing, the economy may grow. Then if you stay in the economy long enough, you'll be happy. Okay? Are you with me on that one? So you think about it. If I am the employment pass person, I may not see the future. I work there for 3-4 years. When the economy works well, I'm gone already. I don't see the benefit. But if I stay there forever, hey, that's different. I can see the future. So the difference between the foreign workers and those those permanent residents and citizens are different, in the sense that what they see as the future benefit will or will not go into their pocket. If the future benefit will not go into the pocket, then in economics we will say the permanent income has declined. So you curtail your consumption. And we find exactly that. So that's part 1. Yes, Chenny?
Local people, they might enjoy the future, like social insurance program or all this.
Correct. Right.
So if you have a better program like that, you can cut your cash holding, right? Because
right.
Better insurance. But the foreigners, they don't have this, right? So they have
correct. They don't see the benefit. They are not entitled. They are not qualified to get the administered benefits. Thank you. Okay. So I think Professor Chen Yin helped us to clarify the concept and move on. But this is a very important point. And somehow the referee make us take this out, unfortunately. Referee is a referee. You're not the referee, I know. You will be more sensible than that. Okay, next. Then we'll say, what about the transfer to a local income group? At this point, what I'm interested to do about the local income group. By the way, I hope I'm not rushing this too much, because I was told that we should leave some time for Q&A and comments and so on. I'm eager to learn from you. And so, can I? So what we now want to do is to look at the other end, those in the lower end. They receive benefits that Chen Lin just mentioned. Some of them include early childhood, child care credits, and or spending on continuous education. There's all these things. And then, so there are multiple ways to get this. One is direct handout, the consumption tax voucher give to people. It start to the lower income people. It start in 2015 March. The other one is the child care credit, which I just mentioned. The third one is the welfare income supplement. Very fancy term, but essentially some handout. Okay. Then the last one is the silver support program. And another, I don't want to dye my hair because I want to get into that program, okay, etc., etc. But all kinds of handout. So what we want to see is what's the macro impact of this. I want to look at this handout if they start in 2015 March. I want to see the consumption change right at that point. I want to see the things that are being really handed to them as the government, as Mr. Tarman promised. Lo and behold, they did. I can again do the statistics, and I don't think I have the. Again, I'm just validating that I've done the statistics, but don't be bothered by that. I want the red line says it. In individual on income range of less than 20, between 20 30 K, and all this income bracket, they make this money per month. They increase, not make. They increase their consumption at that point. And then all this seems to be quite long-lasting. The GST voucher seems to more than just one shot, not more than one off. It has some long-lasting impact. What's the implication of this? The implication of this is that I want to talk about is the distribution wasteful? And I want to make the point is not. We know that the higher income people got taxed. I can actually go and calculate how much they have paid compared to before. I can calculate the tax increase. And I did. We actually have the actual record of how much more they pay. That's how wonderful the micro level data is. Okay? And I calculate and I find out that they have paid 2.5 mil in that year when the tax came in 2017. I can calculate using statistics what's the increase of consumption. Remember this slide, I say don't bother, you see all the red boxes. I can calculate based on all this how much more the poor people have increased their consumption. And that would mean that I can calculate the above and beyond the macro level, just calculate beyond the individual fixed factor, the time fixed factor, how much more they consume. It turned out to be 1.5 per year. Then I look at my small sample, I look at a big population, I can do the very simple projection and find out how much, based on our projection, the increase in tax collection is, and how much is the increase in consumption by those who receive money, above and beyond just the macro effect and so on and so forth. Lo and behold, this is magical. The projected extra spending is this, and the projected extra tax is this. Do you even know? So this is a number to validate that, look, tax the rich, pay the poor, is actually, it is not wasteful. And in a way, I can argue loosely that is self-financing. Okay, in terms of what is taken out from the circulation, what's taken out from the aggregate demand, is put back into the aggregate demand. That's what I'm talking about. It's kind of fun. Now, Mr. Tarman made this wonderful speech in 2015 about I'm spending money to improve the population's productivity capability. And I'm spending money to help the older people. They have extended life expectancy, but they may not have saved enough. I want to give them some money. All this are very good logic, but I want to test this. However, to test whether the extra spending on upgrading people's capability has to wait. We are not done yet. It's a very complicated question. It's like I spend the money and you go to enroll in a continuous education program in Hong Kong U. The government give you back some of the money. Hong Kong U people will be happy. But actually people who enroll in those courses, do they actually come here to take the classes or fall asleep? You don't know. Okay? So that part is complicated. There's another story. I cannot handle that. But I can ask the question, what happened to the senior? It turned out that there's a literature on this, and I list them here, but let me not go into details. Just say that, let us together look at this experience and ask the question. The Singapore government, starting in 2016, hand the money out to those with silver hair. And what happened to these people? What happened to their consumption? Do they use the money cleverly? Second, do they game the system? Do they fake? Do they lie? Do they cheat so as to get the subsidy? These are the two things that all economists would naturally turn to and want to ask. So we do. Now, there's one big issue in all this handout program. We call it the means test program. You have to be very clever, because if you don't do it right, people can cheat your program. If you do it right, then the integrity and the effectiveness is more likely to you're more likely to attain the integrity and the objective. So the means test would be A, 65 and above. You have to be that old, Singapore citizens. Or number two, your savings. With Singapore, we have the CPF. In Hong Kong, you also have the same thing, right? What's the name of the fund in Hong Kong? MPF. So all the PF. Okay, so 70 times roughly times 6.2, something like that, is about less than 400,000 Hong Kong dollar savings. If you have more than that, forget it. Third, your household income per capita has to be less than 1,100. Translate into Hong Kong dollars, less than about 7,000 per month. If you have a household of two, your income has to be less than 14,000 a month, roughly, Hong Kong dollars. You satisfy 1, 2, 3. Then there's number 4. You have to live in government-rented subsidized housing, or you live in a very small HDB. Okay, so these are called means test. We examine the recipient, and you look at this. Almost everything is very readily available, transparent. You can administer very easily. Okay? Then there's all the supplement, but let's not go into the supplementary income detail. So we use the DBS data. This time what we do is that we look at all those that are going to become 65. And we ask the question. Now, because we have, from our data, we know the age, we know the income. We actually know the government deposit of the money into their account. That's the magic about it. We know the income, we know where they live, we know the age, and we know when the government deposits the check into their account. So it's like heaven to us. We look at this, it is. I can track down, okay, I'm going to give myself a check 3 months from now, 3 weeks from now. I can track down all my spending from now and back past 6 weeks. And I can track how much in the future 6 weeks. It's just magical. I mean, this is digitization. So, well, what we do is then we track down the change in the consumption. We say, you get this money, say June 1st. What happened to your consumption way back from January 1st to now? And what is your consumption until December 1st? We see that. And we track and we find out first, the marginal propensity to consume is less than 1. Meaning that magically, these people, they receive $1,000, they don't spend 1,000. They spend less than 1,000. The second thing is that they do rush to spend. More than 30% of their received income will be spent within the first week. And actually, this is the chart, but I'll show it to you again later. Let me just finish this one. And then we find out that who spend less, they will spend less if they have no money, if they are trapped. Liquidity is low. However, what I mean is that I misspoken. Let me try again. They will spend less if they have enough cash. Enough cash. I'm not saying that they're richer, but if I have enough cash, I don't spend the check. Number two, if I have future needs. What do you mean by future needs? If I have an insurance program for my children, or if I have future medical bills, then I know that I have future needs. When I have future needs, I don't spend that much. I spend less than the money I receive. So let me repeat. They don't spend all the money, and they will spend less if they're cash rich for the moment, and if there are a lot of future needs. And then they will spend the money in a rush at the beginning. 30% all spend in the first week. Then afterwards, they don't spend everything. Okay, so that's the empirical observation. The bean counting. Bean counting can be fun. All right, now let's go deeper in the bean counting. Let's say, what do they do? Now again, we can use statistics. I mean, all this thing on the left-hand side is a bit boring. So let's not be bored. Let's just ask the question explicitly. How do the recipients spend the money? How do they spend the money? The second question is, who do not fully spend the money? I know that they don't. So I want to find out if this and this together make good economic sense. Then I'll go to this incentive. So it turned out that I won't show you. I won't drill on this, but it turned out that first they I missed a slide here. Sorry. Let me go back to this. It turned out that I can track down where I can track down their spending. Most of the spending, increase in spending, is on food. We can track that down. There's something called Nielsen data. We know what it is. Second, when it comes to spending, it's like, how do we track down spending? We track down the cash they withdraw from their account. We track down the credit card. We track down the debit card, because DBS has 80% of the market. So I know those in my data, how much they take out from their checking account, savings account, how much they spend using the credit card, how much they spend using the debit card. Then it turned out that they spend most of the spending is through drawing down cash. And second, drawing down cash most of the time is in the neighborhood and next to a food court. You know what is a food court in Singapore? Singapore is called a hawker center. In Hong Kong, how do you call that? No. No such thing. When I was a kid, 我哋去講大排檔. Anyone who speaks Cantonese know what I mean. How do you say it? 請你 You raise it. 大排檔. 香港還有大排檔嗎? Do they have that? So it's like, you find out that their spending is based on drawing cash. Drawing cash from where? From the ATM machine next to the food court, next to the 大排檔. And so it is circumstantial evidence that they spend the money on food consumption. Okay? Then the next thing is that who spend more, who spend less. First, we ask the question earlier. I say, if I do not spend the money, it's because I worry about the future. Prepare for the rainy day. So can I identify who prepare for the rainy day? And it would be like, first, I have a lot of medical costs, and I do want to be cautious. Second, I want to leave some money to my grandchildren. Then I have an insurance program, life insurance program. So I can use this to identify people who have high request motive, and I can use this to identify those with future needs, more volatile income, medical costs, and so on. So I'm able to use the identifiers to show that the consumption out of the handout check is reduced if the person, the recipient, has future needs, higher bequest motive, have more medical uncertainties, and have more volatile income. All these things we can do that. Yes, Chenny?
Yes, so in the literature, people also talk about how to consumption.
Yes. Yes, yes.
These people simply cannot control themselves, right?
Yes.
Cash,
Right, right.
but that's more of a behavioral type of
Yes, yes. There's more a behavioral type of story. I cannot rule this out. I mean, when you go to the food court, are you buying something that you should not eat? You don't know. It may raise your blood sugar. I did not say anything about that. I'm aware of that thing. But what I mean is that generally, you can see that the data in aggregate, on average, comply with our economic intuition, that the majority are pretty rational about the money they receive. Okay? And finally, liquidity. Now, those with high liquidity, high and low income, the literature. Chen talked about the literature. The literature is two types: high low income, high low liquidity. And our work showed that is those that are very low in liquidity. That is the liquidity, the drive, the instantaneous consumption once you receive the welfare check. But that is for the more academically 2 and 2 is not exactly. I don't know because I don't know what's really the policy angle here in solving people with liquidity, because you don't know why they have this low liquidities and so on. But this basically for the purpose showing that the behavior conform with our economic intuition. Okay, so it's not too bad. Now then, the big thing. The big thing is about gaming the system. What do I mean by gaming the system? Now this is complicated. In Singapore, when Junhong and I were both in Singapore, at the beginning, the retirement age was 60. Moved to 63. Right now, you go to the internet, you see 63. And then they have all this possible delay, 65, 68, and now the rumor is that they may push it to 69, and so on and so forth. Okay? And the gaming of the system, remember we have this means test. If I'm going to game the system, there's nothing I can do about the savings, because it's well before my retirement age. The age that I received the the welfare check would be 65. So item number two, no, I cannot game. Item number 3, I can game. I can retire early, drop my income. I make more than 1,100 a month. I quit my job. Then instantaneously, as long as I live in a rented government housing, and as long as my savings is maybe because I'm a big spender, my savings is low, then it's to my benefit to just say I quit the job, I qualify. If I hold my job, I don't. But if I don't hold my job, I do. Or I just somehow tell my boss that I only want to work part-time. I drop my income to make me qualify. That's the really most significant gaming possibility. So there are many things we've done to check whether there's gaming or not. And the one that I wanted to focus on is about gaming by changing your labor supply or by changing your income. Now, what do you mean by game? It depends. The retirement age is like 60, 65, etc., etc. So what we say is that we look at people that are going to turn 60 in half a year, people that will turn 61 in half a year, people who turn 62 in half a year. Track them all down. I look at this group. Then I divide these groups, each group into 5 different categories. Those at the bottom, they will qualify because they're poor enough. Those at the top, they will not qualify. Those in between the top and the bottom, some of them may qualify. So the way to do it is that we track down for each bracket, turning 60, turning 61, turning 62, etc., 63, 65. I divide each of the group into 5 different categories. I know that the bottom category would not need to gain. They will get the money. But the top will not gain because they, no matter what, will not get the money. Okay? But I can stack them up and look at each of them and see how they behave over time. 6 months before and 12 months after they reach the magic age. And this is the line. We have the statistics, but don't bother. Just look at them. If you agree that the labor supply or the wage rate for all brackets, they all collapse in the same way. So there's no visibly and statistically differentiable differentiation in their behavior, in providing a labor supply, in providing the number of hours they work, etc., etc. The bottom line then is that no, they don't gain. They don't gain, okay, because they're all the same. All the brackets are the same. So we can draw the conclusion that the silver support scheme achieves its intended objective of stimulating consumption with little side effect on labor supply and housing. And the above are those that I already said, so I don't repeat. So that is, let me pause for a minute. Am I going too fast? I think, so I'm going to conclude and listen to your comments. Because as you see, we're still working on this, so I really can benefit from your input. Yes?
So you have the missing limits in principle, you can actually see the basket.
Yes. Yes. But the Nielsen data may not give me exactly who's getting the subsidy and who doesn't. I can use that data to say who consumed what. And I did not show that slide. We know that they are increasing on their food consumptions and so on and so forth. But we don't see them increase on cigarette smoking. Right, right. Well, but there's multiple factors. The government keep on showing you all this, you know, the smoker, their lung, you know, this. So there are many confounding, ongoing propaganda and so on. Yes, yes. Right. Well put. Correct. Yeah, yeah. The thing is that sometimes people consume unhealthy food, but maybe that enhances their welfare. Yeah, I still cannot. I know that at this age I need to be careful about my sugar intake. But when I see a bowl of wonton noodle, I cannot stop. You know what I mean? So have I be irrational or rational? That there's a lot of real debate, behavioral economics. Okay, yeah. But your point is well put. Thank you.
Yeah, a couple of reactions. First,
Yeah.
I think Singapore really benefits from very lax data protection law. So it allows you to do this kind of very extensive research, whereas it's increasingly more difficult to do that in China because now China has very strict personal information protection laws. So even if you anonymize the data, I think the companies will be very cautious handing over the data to us these days. I mean the mainland data.
I am not I'm not an expert on the Chinese release of data, but I have seen so many papers in China that they use Tencent, Alipay.
Yeah, but that's no longer the case because
and then the latest one, there's an AEI policy paper 2021 that they actually administer, randomize the control experiment.
Yeah.
So we do not know. Your point may be well or may be correct, especially the data regime nowadays are not like before. But if you talk about China, it's too big a country. It's very complicated. Having a small cut of the data, you have to take the results very carefully, interpret them very carefully. In Singapore, we're okay with that. And then the Singapore's data administration regime is not that different. I think not that different from Hong Kong, because what the data that we receive, we have 80% of the market, and I personally went to Piyush Gupta. We talked about this, and Piyush helped us with the data. Piyush is the CEO. help us with the data with the permission of his staff, and then everything was randomized. We hide the ID, and we hide the name ID, but we have a code, and then and even the U.S. labor statistics, you can do that. So I'm sympathetic, but I don't think it is that. I don't think it's impossible. You can still get the micro level data.
Right. Yeah. The other comment I have is regarding that point you found about the employment path people, the foreign people. I actually think that's a very important point, because when this kind of tax rate increase, I think foreigners probably will be quite sensitive in the sense that because they don't live in Singapore forever, so they have other opportunities elsewhere, considering competition from other places like Hong Kong. So this might accelerate the decisions to leave Singapore, and which might explain why they consume less. Because I'm not going to buy furniture if I'm thinking about moving to Hong Kong tomorrow, right? I mean, so if you take that into account, so even if you are not seeing very significant, distortions in the economy, it might have a negative impact on the economy because it makes Singapore less attractive to maintain talent.
I said that the employment pass people curtail the consumption.
Right.
I did say that.
Yes.
And whether that is enough for them to move out or raise their tendency to move out is a more complicated issue.
So that's
because there's so many other factors
exactly.
that affect their final decision.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Because when you say you tax the rich, I mean, depends on how you look at the rich, because the people who actually pay income tax are not really the ultra rich people. I mean, the really rich people, they live there.
I'll get to that. But so let me just do a quick conclusion. The data and the result we show that possibly you can marginally tax the rich, beneficially transfer to the poor with no visible distortion. You can say that the government can arbitrage between high marginal propensity to consume and low marginal propensity to consume. Taxing those that do not that have low marginal propensity to consume, transfer the dollar to those that are poor and they have high marginal propensity to consume. Could be a smart macro strategy, and to finance all the things. Second, the tax do not curtail the consumption. We have to ask the question why. I think that's what you're getting into. What if this is really way too marginal? Chen Lin talked about behavioral economics and so on. And it's so marginal that it doesn't matter. It is not important enough for you.
That's not matter for the rich. I mean,
right.
Because 1% especially at time my personal terms, I did not buy any property. I did not pay any rent. The only affects how much savings I have. So the saving rate in Singapore for the rich is pretty high.
The motivation for our study is that we don't notice. We're still the same. Some of our friends don't even notice this. Okay, so there is something about at the margin that they don't mind, just tax them. All the saying about no tax, no tax, no tax. I think only people like DT would say no tax. You know who's DT? Donald Trump. Okay, some people don't. It's okay, I think. At the margin, it's doable. Then another angle that the employment pass. There's an angle about Ricardian equivalent. There's a deep economic question since the 70s and go on. But I think, as the referees say, using this to talk about Ricardian equivalent may be a bit too much. So we have to contain our ambition. But in a private conversation, I think it's okay. So I feel that there's a Ricardian thing, meaning current tax, future tax, how the government use the money, and whether they intelligently use the money to raise the aggregate demand. All these are very important factors in considering using the tax as a tool to deal with government, to finance government policy. And then we show arbitrage, we show no gaming. The question is why? Why there's no gaming? Maybe it's because our mean tests are so Dragalian that it's very difficult to scheme it. Imagine, in order to qualify, your saving has to be less than 70,000 Singapore dollar. Life, your CPF has to be less than 70. If your household income is 2,200 per month, okay, household of 2, you multiply this by 6. You're saying that if you quit half a year early, you're giving up 1/7 of your savings. So it may be the mean test is powerful enough that it's okay. We did other programs and so on. It turned out that this program is successful, but there are other programs not very successful in bringing the money to the intended recipient and change their behavior according to the strategic intent of the policy. And so then finally, I said, await further research, future research, and I hope that I can find people, or Sumit and we can find other people to work with us on this. Government spending money to support the population's upgradation of the skill set is very important. With all this fast-pacing technology, you need that. You really need that. But how to do it well, how to do it right is another story. And we hope that more of us can join the workforce in terms of research to identify what program works, what program doesn't work. There are good stories in Singapore. There are not so good stories about some of this also. So this last topic to me is extremely important. Unfortunately, nothing to deliver yet, and please help us to think of a good way to see if we can deliver. Okay?
Thank you very much, Bernie. Excellent presentation on two very rigorous and yet very important papers. Since we only have 10 minutes for Q&A, I probably should save my question for later and see whether the audience has any questions for Professor Yeung. Yeah.
Very short question. There's an administration cost involved in not so much changing the tax rate, but then the second part of that. Did that figure into your research at all? And if so, like in a per dollar, have you looked at that at all?
Very good question. Thank you. May I know your name? Okay, thank you. Very good question. I wish I could do it. We should factor that in. I do not know. Some of the question would be like, what is the additional expenditure by the government to monitor all the administration of the programs? Once it's done, because they're going through the CPF, some of the money is directly deposited into the CPF account. So it's very efficiently administered, okay? But at the beginning, the setup cost and all this, I have no answer. And thank you for your question. I don't know how big they would be, okay?
Yes, Professor Yeung, I mean, it seems quite logical that as the wealth is redistributed, consumption goes up for the poor segment. Do you also see their income levels actually going up? Because, if somebody's getting free money, clearly they'll consume more. But over time, the government policy should also aim that as a result of that distribution of wealth, the low-income groups actually move up the income bracket. Are you seeing that?
That's a very good question. Thank you. In our time frame, it's too short. We cannot see that yet. Okay. And also, what's the change in the upward mobility of the population is more than just this one. So I don't think I can ever give you a clean answer. Second, I'm doing something about the anti-poverty. In 2019, China did an anti-poverty tax deduction program. I can track down who actually spend money on helping the poor because they claim tax deduction. So the government became my auditor, and that research program showed that the SOEs, whether central or local, and the private sector, they all are able to spend the money and elevate people out of poverty. But the government spending cannot. That's what I find in that one. Okay, so the gist behind this is the focused spending, the sharpness of the program to really help the people who need to be helped. That is really the important thing, and that I show is China, Singapore. Okay, the sharpness is very, very important. But the long-term impact I cannot answer. And the China thing, the long-term impact, I cannot answer neither. I only know that they move out of the poverty line. And then finally, my answer to this is that we do this, not that we have answer for everything. The magic of the household finance is that they produce empirical data, empirical results, that you can do some rough logic check to help us to appreciate some of the important social policy questions in this context.
Hi, Professor Yeung. This is Yaxuan from CDU. Okay, I actually have two comments or questions. Number one, the concern about the taxing high-income people is actually say that a government or country may lose the talent because those high-skilled laborers, high-income people are actually having better international mobility. So in the Singapore case, because Singapore's tax burden is actually low compared with other countries, which may not be a big concern. But in other countries which already have a high tax burden, the increase of 1% could cause quite a lot of difference. So in that situation, maybe this funding, do you think it's only specific for Singapore or low tax regime countries?
You say you have two questions. Can I answer the first question first?
Yes, sure.
Because I may forget. I like your question. The long-term effect of this, we really do not fully know, point one. Point two, Singapore is a low-tax country, so marginally raising the tax is not a high-impact event, okay? And now, I like your question because we did something. We asked the question, how would the rich people finance their tax? Some of them pay, even 2% is a lot. They pay 10,000 additional. So how they finance the 10,000? We did a study. We looked at the change in the savings, and we find out that they curtail the savings, okay? In their bank, they reduce their savings by roughly, for $1, they reduce by 20 cents. But the bank money is less than 1/5 of the total portfolio. So it's clearly the case that they do curtail their savings. And we know that reducing saving, especially in some high spending countries, is no good news, okay? So on that, I did not talk about, and I leave it to the future research. I don't have legitimacy to say in the long term what will happen, okay?
Okay. Actually, my second question is also related. So another concern about taxing high-skilled people is actually where disincentive them, because these high-skilled people may reduce the investment. In that situation, actually reduce economic growth. So I'm wondering, because you have the wonderful data, did you actually look at if not this 1% increase tax rate, actually reduce these rich people's, maybe make them early retirement or flat their income in the future?
My answer is that already when I mentioned savings, I know that they reduce the savings. They finance out of the simple savings. I think you can always go and argue about the long-term effect, especially if your tax program is very high. But for these people, I still really believe that the income tax increase is so marginal that these people would not be bothered to switch their job just because of this 2% increase in income. They may switch their portfolio because in Singapore, interest income and capital gain, are not taxed just like in Singapore. And that kind of information I don't have too, okay? At the same time, I cannot, because of my concern about those unknown effects, and say that let's not do it. Look, in the US, you can do the calculation. I'm being taxed, okay? If I raise the rich people's tax by only 1%, it makes a lot of difference. Maybe then on June 1st, we don't have the crisis. You think about it. You can do the simple calculation, and you find out that there exists a lot of things on the margin. We do not want the highbrow, those big policy statements, this incentive, welfare queen, to discourage us from going into micro level detail, examining everything, to come up with an intelligent policy statement. Many people say the Singapore government is intelligent because they do that. Okay, right. Next. Okay.
Nur Daulat from HKU. I'm curious, how far do you think you can push this? Like, how much can you increase the tax such that it's still beneficial?
So far, I do not know. We had some roundtable discussions. a few of us suggested, and these suggestions are being investigated and adopted. Raise property tax. Part of it is because that they are foreigners, they live there, they hold. So I don't feel anything bad taxing them. Okay, we raise the property tax of those high cost properties. We do that, and then we also say that postpone the raising of the consumption tax, the GST, and the government did that. And then we talk about maybe we can push a little bit more, so we actually raised it, the income tax, and there's no protest so far. So we discussed this quite a bit, and every time we try our best to be as marginal in what we do next as possible, so as not to really cause too big a problem. Okay? By the way, have I answered your question? Okay.
Very quick question. You found that it already had some impact on the foreigners, right? So will that cause any brain drain? And will those people come to Hong Kong?
We know what happened later, so I don't know what to say. But I would say the following: Hong Kong, Singapore, the whole greater pan-China area is one market. There's a lot of complementarity and substitution. When the Singapore housing cost, living standard goes up, people go to Hong Kong. Now there are people, it's in newspapers. Various mass media stories say people are coming to Hong Kong. In the past, there were also things about going from Hong Kong to Singapore. And I've talked to various people, and our consensus is that the market is so big. Singapore and Hong Kong will be like in the past, play a complementary role. Okay, and they each will have their specialty. When it comes to, for example, trading RMB with other currencies, Hong Kong is really very good. When it comes to equity market for companies that are making the cash flow in China, Hong Kong is very good. Singapore would not want to. Singapore would want to focus more on the bonds, the fixed incomes, and so on and so forth. And then about the crypto stuff, I think Hong Kong has the nerve to try, and I appreciate the courage. Okay, and I would say if I was sitting in Singapore or in Beijing or Shenzhen, I would say, Hong Kong, try. Let's see what you do. Oh, you are successful, I take this. You are not successful, you take the blame. Okay?
Okay, let me ask the final question, and I guess this is related but outside the scope of your research. You expose all the positive effects on the economy and on consumption, but when the tax was implemented, there must be opposition from the public, especially from the rich. How did the government deal with those potential opposition?
I am going to give you a politically incorrect answer because the opposition, there are oppositions, but they are not publicized. There would be a lot of vigorous discussion. Just like when we were discussing in our room, we say, yeah, you should not raise the GST so fast and so on. So there exists opposition, but behind very keen, closed-door conversation, we are rational about that. I shouldn't say we, but I mean the group. Okay. Then would there be people who really did not like being taxed? Possibly. I cannot answer the question. The economics, statistics is always capturing only the majority. The minority, I don't know. Okay.
Thank you so much, Professor Yeung. Hopefully there are answers for all of you, and hopefully lessons for the Hong Kong government as well. Although we are not here to promote any potential policy changes, but these kind of rational discussions are important. Thank you so much, Professor Yeung.
Have fun. If there's tax increase, blame us. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.